My closest friend forced me into plain clothes for the ball's selection final. You know, I once had a best friend who spent years telling me I was too plain, too boring, to ever really be chosen. So, imagine her absolute meltdown when the most gorgeous man I'd ever seen walked straight past her, through a sea of perfectly dressed girls, and asked me to be his date. What came next was a shocking betrayal that made me question everything I thought I knew about friendship. Every year, it was this massive tradition. The Marine Academy students would come to our university to pick dates for their formal ball. They'd march through our main courtyard in their sharp dress uniforms and one by one, formally ask someone to be their date. My best friend, Alexis, had been obsessing over this moment since freshman year. I'm talking 3 years of meticulous planning. What dress she'd wear, precisely where she'd stand in the courtyard. She even practiced her shocked but delighted face in the mirror. She was convinced, absolutely convinced, that multiple Marines would fall at her feet, and she'd graciously pick the best-looking one. When senior year finally rolled around, she dragged me out of bed at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. just to do her hair and makeup. She had this stunning red dress, bought specifically for this day, a cool $200. And me? She told me to wear my regular jeans and a plain shirt. She said she didn't want us competing for attention, and besides, Marines never pick girls like me anyway. She actually used those words. She said I was the supportive friend type, not the chosen type, and I should be happy with that role. It stung, but I was so used to her comments, I just nodded. We ended up in the courtyard, surrounded by about 200 other girls, and Alexis positioned us right in the center, prime real estate. When the Marines marched in, the whole place went silent. About 30 of them, all in their immaculate uniforms. And leading them, this guy who looked like he'd walked right out of a movie. 6'3", perfect posture, and these incredible green eyes you could spot from across the entire courtyard. Alexis gripped my arms so tight, she left marks, whispering, "He's mine." She started posing, flipping her hair, doing everything she could to get his attention. He walked straight toward us. Alexis stepped forward, her practiced, surprised face already plastered on, ready for her big moment. But he walked right past her. He stopped in front of me. "Hi," he said, his voice deep and calm. "My name is Colin. Would you do me the honor of being my date to the Marine Ball?" Alexis literally gasped out loud, like a full, dramatic gasp. She tried to step between us, spluttering. There must be some mistake. Colin just politely moved around her, his green eyes still fixed on me, waiting for my answer. When I managed to stammer out a yes, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile, and handed me a formal invitation with his contact information. Alexis just stood there, frozen, as other Marines picked their dates all around us. Not a single one approached her. The rest of the day, she didn't say a word to me. Not one. When we finally got back to our apartment, she exploded. "You must have done something to trick him," she shrieked, her face red. "Maybe you talked to him before. You secretly prepared for this and pretended not to care so I wouldn't suspect." The accusations just kept coming. "You knew how much this meant to me, and you deliberately stole my moment." She actually used the word stole, like Colin was some prize she owned. She demanded I text him and cancel, tell him I was sick or had a boyfriend, anything to get out of it. When I refused, she screamed that I was the worst friend in the world and that plain girls like me didn't deserve guys like Colin. She said he probably felt sorry for me or lost a bet and had to pick the ugliest girl he could find. Those words, they just cut. She gave me the silent treatment for 2 days, but that didn't stop her from texting everyone we knew, spinning this wild story about how I'd betrayed her and sabotaged her chances. Then, she did something truly unforgivable. While I was in the shower, she took my phone and texted Colin. She told him I'd changed my mind, didn't want to go with him, and wasn't interested in military guys. Then she deleted the entire conversation. 3 days went by without a word from Colin. I thought he'd ghosted me, just as Alexis predicted. Then his roommate reached out, asking why I'd been so cruel in my rejection. That's when my stomach dropped. That's when I knew exactly what Alexis had done. I contacted Colin immediately, explained everything, my heart pounding the entire time. He was so relieved. He told me he'd actually been really excited to take me. He'd seen me volunteering at the campus veteran center and thought I was beautiful and kind. He'd specifically come to our university, hoping to ask me. We made plans for the ball, but I didn't tell Alexis I'd fix things. Instead, I lied. I told her she was right. Colin hadn't contacted me again, and I probably wouldn't go. She immediately perked up, her old friendly self again, saying she knew he didn't really want me. The night of the Marine Ball, Alexis was in our apartment, watching movies and eating ice cream, convinced I was moping in my room.
But I
was at the ball, in a gorgeous navy dress my sister had lent me, dancing with Colin. He turned out to be funny and smart, and genuinely, truly interested in me. I got back to the apartment around 10 a.m., still buzzing from the night before. The ball had been perfect. Colin had been perfect. My feet hurt from my sister's heels, and I had glitter in my hair, but I didn't care. I opened the door as quietly as I could. Alexis was exactly where I'd left her. On the couch, in her pajamas, blanket-wrapped, watching a rom-com, and eating ice cream straight from the pint. The apartment reeked of popcorn, and there were tissues scattered everywhere, like she'd been having a sad movie marathon. My stomach twisted with guilt, even though I knew what she'd done to me was far worse. She looked up. "How was your moping evening?" she asked, with this fake, saccharine sympathy that made my skin crawl. I clutched my small purse behind my back, my phone, and that formal invitation with Colin's number on the back, safely hidden. "It was fine," I said, heading straight for my room. "Just watch some stuff on my laptop." "I knew you'd get over him eventually," she said, turning back to her movie. "Guys like that don't actually go for girls like us anyway. They just do the whole formal asking thing, because it's tradition." I closed my door and leaned against it, heart hammering. The navy dress was still hidden in my car. I'd changed in the parking lot before coming up. I pulled out my phone. Colin had already texted me twice, asking if I got home safe, saying he had an amazing time. I smiled, texted him back, then shoved the phone under my pillow when I heard Alexis stirring. The next few days were a blur of secrecy. I texted Colin constantly, feeling like I was doing something illegal. He wanted to see me, go to dinner, or just hang out on campus. But every time, I made an excuse. The thought of running into someone who might mention the ball to Alexis made my stomach clench. We finally agreed to meet at a coffee shop 2 miles off campus, a place no students ever went. I got there first, burying myself in a back corner booth. Colin arrived 10 minutes later, in jeans and a regular shirt. He looked different, but still amazing. He slid into the booth and reached across to hold my hand. I pulled back, my eyes darting around the room, paranoid. "Sorry," I whispered. "I'm just being careful." We talked about nothing important for a while. His classes, my biology exam. Then he got quiet, looking at me seriously. "Can I ask you something?" he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Why are we meeting 2 miles off campus, like we're having an affair? I want to take you out for real dates, where we don't have to hide."
So I told him everything.
The phone sabotage. How I'd fixed it without telling Alexis. How I'd let her think he'd ghosted me, just to avoid her meltdown. The lie about the ball, how she still thought I'd spent that night alone. Colin listened, his coffee getting cold. When I finished, he just said, "That's really messed up. What she did with your phone. That's not what friends do." "I know," I said, picking at a napkin. "But if I tell her now that I went to the ball and we're seeing each other, she'll lose it. She'll make my life terrible. We live together, share all the same friends." Colin was silent for a minute. "So, you're going to keep lying to her? For how long?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Until I figure out what to do." He reached across the table again, and this time, I let him take my hand. "I get it," he said softly. "Toxic friendships are hard. I had a buddy at the academy like that. Always competing, always making me feel bad about myself. But here's the thing. You're letting Alexis control your life, even though she doesn't know she's doing it. You're hiding and sneaking around, and that's not fair to you or to me. Honestly, That hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I was still letting Alexis dictate my actions, just like I had for 3 years. I just nodded, staring into my coffee. A week after the ball, Colin texted me. His sister, Margot, was visiting campus, and he really wanted me to meet her. He suggested lunch at the student union. I almost said no. The student union was right in the middle of campus, a high-risk zone for Alexis sightings. But something in his request made me agree. I met them at noon. Margot had Colin's green eyes, but darker hair, and she hugged me like we'd known each other forever. We grabbed food and sat by the windows. I kept looking around nervously, scanning for Alexis. Colin says you two had a great time at the ball, Margot said, biting into her sandwich. He wouldn't shut up about you for weeks before it. Really? I looked at Colin, and he just shrugged with an embarrassed smile. I told her about volunteering at the Veterans Center, he explained. He'd apparently noticed me there months ago. Margot listened intently, asking about my major and my plans. She was so easy to talk to, the kind of person who instantly puts you at ease. Then she noticed me checking the entrance again. You okay? You seem nervous. So I explained the whole Alexis situation from the beginning until now. Margot's expression shifted as I spoke, from interested to concerned to almost angry. Let me get this straight, she said when I finished. This girl made you dress down so you wouldn't compete with her. Then, when a guy chose you anyway, she sabotaged you and has spent years making you feel like you're not good enough, and you're still protecting her feelings. When she said it like that, it sounded insane. I know it's complicated. I started. It's not complicated, Margot cut in, putting down her fork. Real friends don't spend years making you feel less than. They don't manipulate you or tear you down. And honestly, sometimes the trash takes itself out. You just have to let it go. Colin nodded in agreement. I sat there, feeling like they'd just said something so obvious, something I'd been willfully blind to. We finished lunch and walked out. That's when I ran into Dominic, a guy from my dorm, with his girlfriend Sarah. They were heading into the union. Hey. Dominic grinned. You looked amazing at the ball the other night. I didn't know you and Colin were together. My stomach dropped. I could feel Colin and Margot both looking at me, waiting. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, gushing about how cute we looked dancing. Thanks, I managed, my voice strained. Can you maybe not mention it to anyone, though? It's kind of private. Dominic looked confused. Why would it be private? Everyone thought you guys looked great together. Half the people there were talking about it. I'd appreciate it if you didn't bring it up, please. He shrugged. Okay, sure, whatever you want. But it's not a secret, like, people were posting pictures and everything. They walked into the union, and I stood there, feeling sick. Colin gently touched my arm. It's going to come out eventually, he said. You know that, right? I knew. I just wasn't ready. 2 days later, I was in my biology lecture, trying to focus on cellular respiration, when my phone started vibrating in my bag. I ignored it at first, but it kept going, buzz after buzz after buzz. I pulled it out under my desk. 12 texts from Alexis. My hands started shaking as I opened them. The first one just said, "What the fuck?" The second was a screenshot of an Instagram post from someone at the ball. A group photo. I was visible in the background, in my navy dress, Colin's arm around my waist, both of us smiling. The photo was tagged with both our names. The next 10 messages got progressively angrier. She asked why I lied, called me a snake, said she couldn't believe I'd betrayed her. The last one just said we needed to talk immediately. I couldn't focus for the rest of class. The professor's voice became background noise as I stared at my phone, watching the messages pile up. By the time class ended, there were 20 texts. I walked back to the apartment slowly, taking the longest route possible, knowing exactly what was waiting for me. Alexis was standing in the living room, arms crossed, the second I opened the door. Her face was red, her eyes wild. "Why did you lie to me?" she screamed. "Not even a hello. You went to the ball. You went with Colin. And you let me think you stayed home feeling sorry for yourself." I tried to explain. I told her about finding out she'd texted him from my phone, about fixing things, about being scared of how she'd react. But she talked over me before I could get 3 sentences out. You deliberately humiliated me. You snuck around behind my back and made me look stupid to everyone who knew the real story. Do you know how many people must have seen you there and then watched me talk about how Colin didn't want you? You're the one who texted him from my phone. My voice rose. You sabotaged me first. Because you stole my moment. You knew how much that ball meant to me. She was yelling now, truly unhinged. You knew I'd been planning for it for 3 years, and you just took it. I didn't take anything, I retorted, tears pricking my eyes. Colin chose me. That's not something you can steal. The argument raged for 20 minutes. She kept accusing me of plotting against her from the beginning, of secretly arranging everything with Colin. She called me a snake, a fake friend, said I'd been pretending to be supportive while stabbing her in the back. I tried to stay calm, but something in me finally snapped. You sabotaged me first, I yelled, my voice cracking. You texted Colin from my phone and told him I didn't want to go. You deleted the messages, so I wouldn't know. And you've been undermining my confidence for 3 years by calling me the supportive friend type and acting like I should be grateful you even hang out with me. Alexis went completely silent. For about 10 seconds, she just stared at me. Then her expression changed, turning cold, utterly dismissive. You're delusional if you think Colin actually likes you, she sneered. He probably felt sorry for the sad girl in plain clothes. Or maybe it was a dare. Pick the ugliest girl you can find. That's probably what happened. Something inside me broke, but not the way it usually did when she said things like that. This time, instead of hurt, I felt a sharp, piercing clarity. I could see the patterns so clearly. Years of little comments designed to keep me small, to make me doubt myself. Years of her positioning herself as the pretty one, the chosen one, while I was supposed to accept being the backup friend. I'm done, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm done listening to you tear me down. I'm done pretending this is a normal friendship. You don't treat people you care about like this. She laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You'll come crawling back. You always do. Because without me, you're nobody. I walked to my room and closed the door, my hands still shaking. I could hear her in the living room, slamming things. Then my phone started buzzing again. I looked at it. She was already posting on social media. I opened Instagram. There it was, a long, detailed thread about how I'd betrayed her by secretly going to the ball after she'd been so gracious about Colin choosing me. She made it sound like she'd been totally supportive, and I'd just snuck around behind her back for no reason, carefully editing out the part where she sabotaged me. She made herself the victim of my cruel deception. My phone exploded with messages. Mutual friends asking what happened, people taking sides. Some believed her. Some asked for my version. I sat on my bed, watching the notifications pile up, and realized she was forcing my hand. I could either publicly defend myself or let everyone believe I was the villain in her carefully crafted story. I sat there, staring at my phone until 3 a.m. The notifications kept coming in waves. I opened a blank post and started typing, my hands shaking, trying to find the right words without sounding cruel or defensive. I deleted entire paragraphs, rewrote them. I wanted people to understand what really happened, but I didn't want to destroy Alexis publicly, even though she'd tried to destroy me. Around 4 a.m., I finally had something that felt honest. I explained how she'd texted Colin from my phone while I was in the shower and deleted the conversation. I attached screenshots, the message she'd sent pretending to be me, and the timestamp proving I was showering. I wrote about how she'd spent 3 years telling me I was the supportive friend type and not the chosen type. I kept it factual, trying not to attack her. I read it 12 times before finally hitting post at 5 a.m. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but my brain wouldn't shut down. When I woke up 3 hours later, my phone had exploded with responses. Some people were shocked about the text message sabotage. Couldn't believe Alexis would do that. Others said I still shouldn't have lied about going to the ball, that deceiving her made me just as bad. A A few mutual friends said we were both being dramatic over a guy and needed to grow up. One girl I barely knew wrote a long comment about how the whole situation was toxic and we both needed therapy. I felt sick reading through it all, knowing that no matter what I said, some people would always think I was the villain. My phone rang around 2 that afternoon. Colin's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, embarrassed about the whole public mess. He asked if I was okay, his voice sounding angry, but not at me. He said he'd seen everything on social media and couldn't believe Alexis had sabotaged me like that. He asked why I hadn't told him about all the other stuff she'd said over the years, about me being the supportive friend type. I explained that I'd gotten so used to her comments, I didn't even recognize them as put-downs anymore. Colin was quiet for a moment, then told me about his own former best friend from high school who constantly competed with him over everything: grades, sports, girls, even stupid stuff like push-ups. He said it took him 2 years after graduating to realize that real friends don't make you feel like you're always losing some invisible competition. We talked for over an hour about toxic friendships and why people stay in them. He said something that really stuck with me. Sometimes we accept treatment from friends that we'd never accept from a stranger because we confuse history with loyalty. I felt less alone after that call. Someone finally understood why this whole situation was so complicated. That evening, someone knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it, expecting Alexis, but found Liliana Gonzalez, who lived next door. We'd always been friendly, but not close. She asked if she could come in, and I moved aside. She sat on my desk chair and said she was glad I finally stood up to Alexis. I must have looked surprised because she laughed and said she'd been watching our dynamic for 3 years. She told me Alexis treated me badly and she'd wanted to say something before, but didn't want to cause drama. She'd seen how Alexis always positioned herself as the pretty one and made subtle comments that kept my confidence low. She even offered to be a witness if I needed to talk to housing about the hostel living situation. I thanked her, feeling so grateful. I usually kept to myself and didn't realize anyone had noticed what was happening. She hugged me before leaving. "Real friends build you up instead of tearing you down," she said. The next week was exhausting. Our mutual friend group basically split into factions. Some people sided completely with Alexis and stopped talking to me. Others thought her text message sabotage was worse than my deception and made a point to sit with me. Most people just seemed tired of the whole situation and avoided both of us. I lost a few friends I'd had since freshman year who believed Alexis's version. But I also got closer to people like Liliana and Dominic, who told me they'd always thought something was off about how Alexis treated me. Dominic pulled me aside one day and said he'd watched Alexis manipulate situations for years and was relieved I finally saw through it. The social fallout felt like middle school drama, but it was real, and it hurt losing people I'd considered friends. Living in the same apartment with Alexis became unbearable. We barely spoke, except when absolutely necessary. She'd make pointed comments about fake friends whenever I walked through the living room. She'd turn up the TV volume when I was trying to study. She'd leave her dishes in the sink for days. Knowing it bothered me, I started spending most of my time at the library or at Colin's place, just to avoid being home. I went to the housing coordinator's office, explained the situation. She was sympathetic, said I could request a room change for spring semester, but nothing was available until then. I was stuck in this hostile environment for another 6 weeks. I counted down the days, trying to stay out of the apartment as much as possible. Colin invited me to a Marine Academy event 3 weeks after everything blew up. I was nervous about meeting more of his friends, worried they'd heard about the drama. But when we arrived, everyone was welcoming and treated me like I belonged there. Colin introduced me to Declan Knight, one of his closest friends. Declan's date was friendly and mentioned that Colin had talked about me for weeks before the ball selection. She said he'd been planning how to ask me and was worried I might say no. I looked at Colin and he just smiled and squeezed my hand. Being around people who didn't know about the Alexis situation, who just saw me as Colin's girlfriend, felt incredibly refreshing. No one was judging me or taking sides. They just accepted me as part of the group. Declan's date also mentioned Colin had told everyone I volunteered at the Veteran Center, and that's what first caught his attention. Hearing that made Alexis's claims that he felt sorry for me seem even more ridiculous. I was making coffee in the apartment kitchen one morning when Alexis walked in. We'd been avoiding each other for 3 weeks, and the sudden proximity made me tense. She stood there for a moment, then said, "We need to talk like adults." I cautiously agreed and turned to face her. She said she'd been thinking about everything, and she was sorry for texting Colin from my phone. My hope lifted for a second until she immediately added that I still shouldn't have lied about going to the ball. She said we both made mistakes, but mine was worse because I deliberately deceived her. I realized this was as close to an apology as she was capable of giving, one that still made everything partially my fault. She couldn't just apologize without adding conditions or spreading the blame around. I took a deep breath. "I appreciate the partial apology," I told her, trying to keep my voice even. "But I can't go back to a friendship where you need me to be less confident so you can feel better about yourself. Your years of subtle insults about me being the supportive friend type really damaged me, even if you didn't mean them that way." She looked genuinely surprised, like she had no idea what I was talking about. She said she was just being honest about our different social roles, that some people are naturally more outgoing and attractive while others are better in supporting roles. She said I was being oversensitive and reading too much into normal friend observations. That confirmed everything I needed to know. She fundamentally didn't understand how her words had affected me, and probably never would. We reached an agreement to be civil roommates for the remaining weeks of the semester. No more pointed comments about fake friends. No more social media drama or public arguments. Just polite coexistence until housing changes happened in January. It wasn't friendship, and it wasn't the closure some people expected, but it was livable. I felt relieved to have clear boundaries, even if they weren't the reconciliation everyone thought we should have. Some mutual friends seemed disappointed that we didn't hug and make up, but I was done pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Finals week came and went. I got my approval for a room change to a single for spring semester. I packed up my stuff the day after my last exam and moved everything to my parents' house for winter break. My sister picked me up, and on the drive home, she asked how I was doing. I told her everything that happened since the ball. She was quiet for a while, then said she was proud of me for standing up for myself. She said watching me accept Alexis's treatment for 3 years had been hard, but she knew I had to figure it out on my own. My parents were supportive when I got home, even though they'd always liked Alexis and seemed sad the friendship ended. My mom said sometimes friendships run their course, and that's okay. My dad asked if I was sure I'd tried everything to fix it. I explained that you can't fix a friendship where one person needs the other to stay small. They both hugged me and said they understood. Having their support felt validating, even though the situation was complicated and messy. Winter break arrived with the quiet relief of distance and space. Colin and I started doing video calls every few days, and those conversations felt different from any friendship I'd had before. He'd ask about my day and actually listen to my answers without redirecting the conversation back to himself. When I mentioned feeling nervous about a family dinner, he didn't tell me I was overreacting or that other people had it worse. He just said my feelings made sense and asked what would help me feel better. I noticed how different this was from years of Alexis dismissing my concerns or turning them into opportunities to talk about her own problems. One night, we were on a call and I mentioned missing the campus veteran center where we'd first crossed paths. Colin smiled. "I'd been hoping you'd bring that up," he said. He told me he'd visited 3 times before the ball selection, always timing it so he could see me interact with the older vets. He'd been working up the courage to introduce himself for weeks. Hearing that made something shift in my chest. Alexis had spent years convincing me that guys like Colin didn't notice girls like me unless they felt sorry for us. But Colin had noticed me specifically because of my character and kindness, not to spite some imagined flaw. We made plans for spring semester, including study dates at the library and weekend trips to nearby hiking trails. And I realized I was building something real with someone who genuinely wanted me to succeed and feel confident. My sister came into my room one afternoon and caught me smiling at my phone during a text conversation with Colin. She sat on my bed and said she was glad I'd finally found someone who treated me the way I deserved. That validation from her meant everything, because she'd watched the Alexis friendship damage my self-worth for 3 years. Spring semester started with me moving into my single room in a different building. The freedom of that space felt incredible. I could decorate however I wanted without worrying about Alexis's opinions. I could study without her pointed comments about how some people had to work harder than others. I could just exist without constantly monitoring whether I was being too confident or too successful or too anything. 3 weeks into the semester, I was grabbing lunch in the dining hall when I saw Alexis at a table across the room with some girls from her communications class. Our eyes met for a brief second. We both nodded politely before looking away. No dramatic confrontation, no tears or apologies or attempts to rehash everything. Just two people who used to share everything and now shared nothing. I sat with Liliana and Declan, who'd become real friends over the past few months, people who celebrated my successes instead of finding ways to diminish them. Colin joined us a few minutes later, kissed my cheek before sitting down. And I caught Alexis watching from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. I turned back to my friends and focused on the conversation happening at my table instead of worrying about what she thought. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness about losing what I thought Alexis and I had, but mostly I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Relief to be free of constantly feeling like I wasn't enough. Have you ever had a friendship that made you feel small? How did you finally break free? Or what did you learn from it? I'd really love to hear your experiences in the comments below.